Hey,
Yeah.
hey, live here. All right, so I am Matt, and you are
Sabrina.
yes. And Sabrina, today, what is it that you want to talk about?
So, I guess in the motion graphics community, but also kind of in general with anybody who works, there's always this conversation going on about work-life balance. Um, in motion graphics specifically, you have like your industry hubs in these big cities. So you have a lot of cool job opportunities, but then people are like, how do I spend time with my family though? Because there's all this kind of uh, this culture of like I gotta hustle to make things work, but then you end up slacking on just being a regular human and hanging out with friends and family and whatnot. Whereas in freelance, you should have more freedom with scheduling and stuff, but it's freelance, and so it's like can be some instability. So I just wanted to ask you about your experience with work-life balance because I know you've had time doing both in studio and freelance, and I haven't really jumped into tackling that yet. So before I head in, I'm like, what do I need to expect out of it? Is it difficult to attain? Do you think it's possible?
Cool. All right, that's a good question, and it's definitely something that a lot of people kind of talk about, and a lot of people struggle with, and I don't know. A lot of people have these kind of real hacky ways of navigating this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I've done this, and I'm not going to say that I've created a very perfect scenario. It's an ever-changing one because your life will be ever-changing. Priorities shift, new things pop up. Um, so it is good to always be kind of looking for the best way to kind of do things. So the first thing I'll say is I believe that anybody just getting out of school or even in school, I think that's basically any of that time before you get your first job, really. I think that's a really good time to really hustle and to really just put as much time into this stuff as you possibly can. Um, I'm not going to say that you should work like 15 hours a day, um, but if you did, you'd learn a lot. You'd gain a lot from that experience of working 15 hours in a day. One of the big things that I felt like so I went about 6 months without a job after school. I think we talked about that before. One of the big things that I decided to do was, okay, well, I'm going to work as much as I possibly can in this time. I'm not going to sit here and just kind of like wallow in the idea of not having a job and just be like depressed. It was a little depressing, but
Been there.
that's a whole different exactly. That's a whole
Right?
different story, I guess. But for me, I had this specific idea that most people were putting in 40 hours a week. If I put in 45 or 50 hours a week, then I could start to catch them. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure we talked about that concept before, but that's something that I've thought a lot about, where it's um, not necessarily trying to be like better than everybody else or whatever. But if I want to be as good as somebody else, then I need to essentially put in as much time as they have. And there's only one way to do that, and that's just seriously put in the hours.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, once I got my first job, it was a 40-hour a week job. Um, Pretty rarely any sort of like overtime. So, I mean, this was kind of a pretty corporate type environment where I was surrounded with a lot of older people. And by older, I mean probably between like 35 to 50 was probably like most of the crowd there. And I was 22, I think, when I started. So I was the youngest by significantly, by a significant amount. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and all of these people, you know, their priorities were um, their families. So it was kind of interesting because I'm like in the middle of this hustle and I wanted to get a lot. You know, I'm just starting my career, and I know how important it is just to work a bunch. So I'm just trying to work. And a lot of people were like, why are you like moving so fast on things? I'm like, just trying to get done. Like the more shit you get done, the better you get, you know?
Yeah.
But for a while, you know, it kind of irritated me a little bit that I was kind of working at this place. All the people were great people. But there was, I don't know, I just wasn't with the right people that would push me enough. So that's where I was like, okay, I gotta find a way to push, or find a place that would be able to push me to get more out of me. And that's whenever I decided to go out to Los Angeles, and working there was a completely different experience, where the oldest person there was the owner, and he was, I think, 28 or 29 at the time. So there was probably, I don't know, maybe eight to 10 of us, and we ranged from 22 or 23 to 30. And nobody had like kids or family really at that point. Like most of the people there are from other places like Connecticut or Ohio. I would say I met more people in Los Angeles that were from Ohio than I did California, which is really weird. But so being there, it was just kind of, the amount of working was just different because everybody was trying to push as hard as I wanted to. So we would work from pretty early. Well, I would anyway. A lot of people would show up at like 10, but I love to start working at like 7 or 8. And then I'd work till usually 6 or 7. So pretty long days. Whenever there was a project in, it would be like, okay, let's work till like 11 or 12, which was really tough. And I don't know, there'd be times where you're like, man, I really don't want to stay that late. But then there's other times where you're like, I don't know, the environment of working like really late just gets really like loopy and just kind of fun. It's hard to explain, but it just feels like a little sleepover. So a lot of times it's fun a lot of times, but at the same time, it's like, that's not really sustainable to work that many hours all the time.
Right. You can only have so many sleepovers, and then you're like, I gotta sleep.
Exactly. And so it was cool every now and then whenever it happened. And we'd go stretches where it'd be like maybe 2 or 3 months, and then nothing like that would come up. But then there'd be stretches of 2 to 3 months where it's just constantly like getting all that stuff out. And for a small company, it's really difficult to. It was tough for them to be like, oh, okay, it'll just be a normal day today. Like most of the time they didn't know anybody's working late until about like 3 or 4. And that was frustrating for me usually, because I'm like, I was getting ready to go home. Like, I don't know, you kind of start to check out a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
So after a while, you kind of get burnt out a little bit. Whenever you do that pretty consistently for a long period of time, because again, it's not sustainable. Nobody in this world can sustain that amount of work in a longer period of time like that.
Right.
So for me, it was kind of get to the point where you're like, all right, I gotta make a change. Like that's not the lifestyle that I want to live. So I had my wife with me at the time, and she was pregnant, and we knew that, okay, as soon as our baby's born, we're gonna make a pretty big change, do something, because that's, you know, I don't want to leave before he wakes up and then get home and then he's already sleeping. Like I don't want that kind of life. And I've always been pretty clear about that. I mean, I do love the work that I do. And I'm not going to say that it's always the second priority. My work is, but I try to make it that way as much as I possibly can. And that's kind of, I guess, a personal flaw with me, is that sometimes family and work are on the same level, and it shouldn't be that way. Well, at least that's how I feel. There's other people out there that can feel however they want to, and they can make the decisions however they want to. But for me, it was, I obviously want to play a bigger role in my family, and I don't want my kids to kind of grow up and just not be there, you know.
Mhm.
With my family, my dad always got off work at like 3:20, 3:30 or something, and he would be there probably, I don't know, within an hour of me getting home from school. He'd take a minute to decompress, and then we'd start playing baseball or something. Um, so by 4 o'clock, we're like outside doing stuff, and
Yeah.
we basically do that. Watch the Indians game at 7 o'clock. And, I don't know. So I hung out with my dad and my mom too quite a bit. I mean, my mom usually worked a little bit later in the nights, like six or so. Um, but I would still consider that to be pretty good for a family to just kind of
Yeah, it's a
spend.
good model, isn't it?
Yeah, like I never said in my entire life, man, like I wish my parents were around more.
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
so I was kind of approaching a territory that I've never experienced before. That is just really unfamiliar, you know. Because it's like, yeah, everybody always wants either the childhood they want for their children, either the childhood they had or better. Like, nobody ever wants one that's worse, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so while kind of thinking about that, the 9 months that she was pregnant, we were like, okay, we gotta do something, because it's not it here. You know, I tried looking at a few other jobs, and it's really common there in Los Angeles for people just to work long hours. And again, that's totally cool. It's just not the life that I was kind of looking for. Um, so one of the things that we did was just start looking at a bunch of cities, and we're just trying to figure out basically a few different things that we had on the checklist, which was, you know, we want a house someday. We just couldn't afford a house in Los Angeles unless you're like a pilot or a doctor.
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
understand how anybody buys houses there. Like, there's so many houses. There's people living in them. I have no idea exactly how they do it, but um, that was kind of a priority. Like, we want a house, we want a yard, we want to be able to have a little swing set in the backyard. You know, it's sort of like everybody wants to live a certain story, you know, and Los Angeles couldn't play a part in that story. So we started looking at a bunch of cities, and that was the big thing, was let's check on like real estate. We want something that's not stupid expensive, and also a place that there is a market for what I do. And that was a little hard at first to try to find that right place, because initially I was looking in a few cities where I'm like, oh, okay, I see stuff popping up here, but then it's like it's only healthcare stuff, and it's like not the cool kind of healthcare stuff.
Yeah.
Like, so that was kind of a big thing, where it's like, oh man, I don't want to do that. But in the end, it came down to, let's just pick a city that we want to live in. Like, let's not worry about the work side so much, because I knew that no matter where we picked, I could make it work. Um, and we chose Columbus. And since we've been here, I decided. So at this point, that's whenever I decided to start my own company. And there's a whole slew of reasons why I did that. But since I did that, my schedule opened up significantly more. I get to see the kids whenever I want, basically. Aside from like going out for meetings. I mean, right now I'm working in the front room of our house. This is my office. I never sit on this couch right here. It's just straight up, basically. um, but I do still work a little bit longer sometimes, but it's nicer because I get to, for lunch, I can just hop on over to the next room over, you know. But I would say that since doing my own thing, that's been the biggest thing for me, has been that ability to just have an open schedule. And even, I guess one of the things that I always didn't like about working for someone else was, whenever I wanted to make something or when there was downtime, I hated busy work. I always hated busy work. where it's just like, oh, just because there's nothing going on, you want to do this like stupid thing. And it's like, it's not gonna be, you're not going to use it for anything. Like you didn't even think about this idea like 15 minutes before you asked me to do it, but then you're just like doing it. And it's just, I don't know, it's stupid. Like I love working on like big client projects, but man, that busy work is the worst. But now whenever I run out of things to do, it's easier to jump on my own projects. So a lot of time that I spent, and if you even look at the portfolio right now, look at the Zwelly portfolio, probably 80% of those projects are all personal projects, stuff I did in between client projects. A lot of people get really scared about that time, like in between client projects, and all they do is just email and cold call and do all that stuff. And I do marketing efforts, but I try not to get scared. I guess it's happened more than a few times, so now I kind of know how to handle it in general. But now it's always just kind of like keep a project going in the back of my mind, and like as soon as you have a minute, it's like boom, get to it and just start working on that. And that's been really huge for just kind of being on my own like this. And we've talked about it before. The other big thing is if I get a lot of stuff done in 5 or 6 hours of the day, I'm happy with the day, and I can take the rest of the day off. We'll go to the zoo. And like, I don't know, there is nothing like going to the zoo on a Wednesday. there's
no I could be.
It's tough to do things. It's tough to do things on the weekend anymore, because you're like, oh, there's waits, there's lines to do things. It's the worst. So that's kind of where I am now with the whole, I guess, the work-life balance conversation. And like I said, it's an ever-going thing where you always have to be kind of making adjustments and like looking at everyone in the family and being like, am I spending enough time with you? Should I take today off just to like let my wife have some time, like let her have the morning off, whatever. Because she's over on this side of the wall and she's constantly dealing with 2 kids all day long. So for her, there is no such thing as work-life balance. It's work life, just constant thing. So for me, it's a lot about just kind of trying to notice again how everybody's doing, and kind of being the leader of the family, I guess.
I think the downtime thing is really smart though, because that's another kind of related side conversation. Artists will be like, and I've seen it really frequently on Twitter lately. People are talking about it right now, it seems, and they're saying like, the culture in LA, it's like having to hustle all the time. And then let's say you're in something more freelance, or you're in an unemployed situation and have a little more freedom, then there's this guilt of not hustling all the time. Like if I'm not working, I'm not contributing, and then they feel guilty over it. And I'm thinking, man, that downtime is so important. And if you were in the LA environment, you don't have any of that. And then you can get burnout. So I don't know, like it's really hard to convince people not to feel bad about it, because you totally get it too, because everybody's felt that way. Like the whole, if they're working this many hours, I should work this many. And it's like, yes, but also you got to reserve some time to like, you can learn something, you can like watch tutorials all day, you could like go outside, spend time with people. And I think there has to be a conversation like these things are just as important to prioritize as the doing and making. Like you can't have one without the other.
Absolutely. So with that, I think that everybody's a little bit different. You have your freaks out there that can just constantly hustle and work all day long, every single day. But that's just what they want to do with their time all the time, and they don't want to do anything else. And that's fine, but it really comes down to an individual basis. I don't think that anyone should ever feel bad for not working 12 hours a day. Um, I can say that I believe that it would help in most cases. Working that much would help you become better at something.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that it's necessary all the time. For me, that's been one thing that I've been trying to like kind of cut back on. And so every day I work from 8 to 5. And I say I work 8 to 5 every day, but it's so much more than that, because in the mornings I'm either writing or sketching or like thinking, like whenever I'm watching the kids in the morning, and then like at night sometimes I'll film an episode of this Welly show, and sometimes I'll write there, and sometimes I'll sketch there. So I say it's 8 to 5, but it's probably a couple more hours after that. But that stuff doesn't feel like work to me, because that's just like just random stuff that I don't need to get done. I just do it to try to understand something a little bit better for the next day, usually. But yeah, it is tough, because you have your people out there, like a lot of the big people, like Gary Vaynerchuk especially. I'm not sure if you listen to him at all, but his whole thing is work 16 hours a day, like work, because that's what he did. He only knows the one way because that's what he did, right? So it's totally cool that he says that. But I don't think that, I guess it comes down to priorities, where it's, if you only have this one thing that you're obsessed about, then do it. If you have several things that you're obsessed about, which being obsessed about your family, I think is a good thing, a good habit, I guess. Do that thing too. It's, I don't know. I guess for me, once I got to, like, I'm not done learning anything. But once I got to a certain spot where I kind of felt better about like the stuff that I knew, I was just like, okay, now most of my learning at this point is done like during projects, not so much outside of that. So I can say that's one thing, that's one area that I've kind of fell off over time, like after having a family. Because I mean, I don't know, everybody always says to me, they're like, I don't understand how you do all these things with a family and all this stuff. Like, well, there's just a lot of things that I don't do now. Like, I don't really watch that much TV. I mean, I still watch a few episodes of The Office almost every day, but
I was watching it last night.
I was watching the commentary episodes last night, actually, which sometimes funny, sometimes not. I don't know. Either way, and I don't play video games anymore, and that, I'm not necessarily bitter about that one. I love video games. I used to always play them. Like that's kind of one big way that I got into this stuff that I do every day now, is playing video games, and I love the design of certain things or whatever. And I don't do that so much anymore. And if you were to tell me that that was going to be the case like 8 years ago, that I wouldn't play video games anymore, I would have been like, that's the worst. Like, no way. But I'm totally cool with it. Like, whenever I get a chance here and there, I might put Call of Duty on. But for the most part, there's just so many other things that I'd rather be doing. And I'm very honest with myself, and I know what those things are. So it's, I don't know. You kind of you pick between things, you know?
I think it comes from like a comparison trap too, because somebody may see like, oh, this person's 20 and they're already like doing this and that. And it's like, we've talked about that before too, about how a certain level of comparison, it's like you need to know where the general level is that you need to be in to be kind of marketable and whatnot. But other than that, whatever they're doing is not the same. Like, they may have different wants and different needs. They may not have a social life and be totally fine. And like, what if you want to, have a life that's other than just what you do? Or if like you've worked really hard to have a job where what your work is what you love and stuff, then yeah, it's like you can dedicate your time to that. So there's no wrong way to go about it. There just has to be a little less like chill.
For sure. And kind of going to your point where kind of looking at people that are really amazing. Those people are the outliers. And I don't think that it's good to compare yourself to certain people that have gone through just a different life. They went through a completely different series of events to get them to where they are right now. And I just don't think that that's a good approach. And I mean, I say that because I went that route, you know. I'm constantly looking at these people and I'm like, damn, like they're so good. Like I want to be that good, you know. Which is kind of a double-edged sword, because that's a good way to kind of motivate yourself to keep working and doing good work. But at the same time, you don't know what their struggles are, and they struggle with something. I guarantee it. Everybody does.
Yeah.
So if they're really good at this one thing, there's something else that they're kind of missing at the same time.
Yeah.
But really, I guess, you know, the thing that I started doing was like, and it's just exhausting to keep looking at what everybody else is doing and try to keep up. So for me, it was, I apologize for the cries, if you can hear that. For me, it was literally just, what is it that I want to do? Or what is it that I want to be able to do? And am I using my time as effectively as I possibly can? And again, that's not the time from, that's not just saying like, okay, from 8 to 5, I do a bunch of work. It's, is there like an hour here and there where you can kind of like sneak something else in? Maybe that's not like work, but like more plan-based stuff. So like for me, I'll even show you. Every single night, it's about putting a little checklist together. So every single day, I write in this, and I just write like, it's sort of like a journal thing, I guess, but it's really just about knowing the priorities for every single day, for every month, for every year. Like having those priorities and not letting yourself kind of look around at anybody else, like what they're doing. You know?
You can build from that instead of just freaking out.
For sure.
And it takes time too. It takes time and it takes planning, and even the journey that you just described, it was over a period of years. And I think people get scared that if I'm not like this tomorrow, everything's going to be ruined. And it's like the person you see that's like God tier level at whatever they do, it was probably over the course of at least a decade, unless there's some savant.
Absolutely. And that's another thing where it's like, I don't know, you have this kind of maybe pressure or expectation after school that you're supposed to be the best. And there's so many people that like, maybe they're not that great once they come out of school, but then they just stop because they're like, well, I'm not at that level. Like it's just not me. What they don't realize is that a lot of these people are, you know, maybe into their 30s or late 20s. And it's like, it literally does take like 10 years after you graduate to really get somewhere. Like I'm so much better than I was like just 3-5 years ago. I used to, you know, whenever you're in school, you look back at the stuff you did like your first year, and then you're like, "Whoa, geez, like, I'm about to graduate. That stuff was really shitty." That never stops happening.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm looking at last year, and I'm like, "Ooh," it like makes me cringe. But like, I don't know. I think that stuff is important, and it's important to just recognize and understand that you're not going to. It's not likely that you're going to be the very best at anything right after school or even 5 years after. It takes time, and you shouldn't compare yourself to the super greatest, the best people, and however they got to that point. You just got to kind of find your own path and just do something. It may not be the right thing, but it's not being scared to try the wrong thing. And putting your practice in however you can, and changing as often as you think you need to. If you think, which you'd be a rare person if this is the case, but if you think that you have the perfect schedule, you know which hours you're most productive, like you know all these things, and you, I don't know, are perfectly in balance, I guess, that's great. But if you're not, start tinkering things with your schedule. Like if you just don't do good in the mornings, work later. If you hate working later, work earlier. If you find that you're only good for, if you can only work really solid for 4 hours a day, work the weekends and then work 4 hours on the weekend. Like it's literally just completely open. Obviously, when you work at a studio, it's a little bit different. But that's a good opportunity to kind of find what works and what doesn't work for you during that time. So especially if you had the intentions of going off on your own or freelance someday, then it's taking note of all of these things and tinkering until you find the thing that works for you specifically. Because there's not a single person out there that can tell you exactly what you should be doing. Cool.
Yeah, totally. I agree.
Nice.
I guess there was one more thing if we back up to talking about burnout when you were at the studio. So you kind of described like how you dealt with that, but has there been any other point in time where you had that experience, and how did you like come away from that?
Yes. It happened a lot more whenever I was out in Los Angeles. And it was just because it wasn't so much working long hours. It was working long hours on one thing. And I still find that that is the case with me currently, where anytime that I work, just not necessarily long hours, just a constant, like if it's a project that lasts for 4 weeks and it's like the same project, yeah, I get burnt out on it for sure. But I don't know. I love making stuff. That will never change. I will never get burnt out about making stuff. It's just what I'm making that I might get burnt out on. So for me, it's okay, if I'm tired doing hand-drawn animation, I'm just going to do some stop motion stuff today. And every single time that works for me. Where I might do that for a day or two, and I'm ready to do something new, you know? I'd say that's kind of my biggest thing. The other thing is taking vacations. It's really nice to be able to just go somewhere for a long period of time and not have your computer there, so you can't do anything even if you wanted to. So that is the hard part about working from home, is that my computer's always here. It's always, even whenever I'm not working, it's still around, you know. And for the most part, I'm pretty good at just staying away from it. I lock the door whenever I walk out. If I go in here for anything, it's usually not work related. But it's really great to just, I don't know, work a bunch and then take like a week off. So that's the other freedom that comes with doing freelance or running your own company, is taking however much time you need off. So it's my unlimited vacation policy. Where I'd say the last 3 years, I've probably averaged taking off about 6 weeks. And I don't put a number on it. I don't really care about the number. I simply go by feel. It's like, man, I need a vacation really bad. Like there's some like bigger vacations, like we're going to Italy later this year. Like stuff like that needs to be planned out a little bit. But there are sometimes where we're like, let's go to Chicago for the weekend. Or even like the week, whatever. It's really cool to be able to do those things, to have the freedom to kind of, you know, just understand what feeling you're in right now, or what, I don't know, how things are going with work and the schedule, to be able to take opportunities whenever they're there.
Right.
Cool. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. What did you say? Sorry.
I said, does that answer the question?
Yes.
So for you at this point, so you're currently intern, and you're looking to go into freelance. Now, how do you kind of navigate your schedule at this point? And do you feel like you're working as much as you should or could be?
Yeah, I think so. Sorry, I can hear myself a lot in the background. I'm going to lower my volume a tad.
Okay.
So I do a lot of the same things that you do as far as like making lists and whatnot. So I think during school, I learned how to organize my time really well. But I also got burnt out, but I was doing a bunch of different things at the very tail end of senior year. But I learned from that, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to have like 500 things going on at the same time anymore. Um, and during this internship, I do like having the time to go and learn on my own when I'm not doing like a client or internal project. And I think I thought at the beginning, like, I'm going to take my extra time to do a bunch of personal projects. But uh, as we were going down the path and doing a lot of things for people, then I started seeing, like, oh, I'd like to learn more about this and that. And so I was just like, well, I don't have to be making stuff right now. I could just be taking this time to learn instead. And that's been really energizing because closing those skill gaps builds up my confidence to do my own stuff later on. And so I don't feel guilty about it at all. I'm like, I'm going to learn all this stuff. And so I'm assuming that would just continue later on. Same thing. It's like, I'm going to dedicate this time to doing my own thing, or I'm going to, just depends on what the time is and what my goals are. And then I figure out how to do it.
Yeah, I think that's key is what you said about like your just now about your goals. Like knowing what your goals are at any given point, I think is really crucial to any kind of balance in life. And understanding that those goals change constantly, and it's okay. Like for me, my goal out of school was I want to work at Pixar. And I held on to that little goal of mine for the longest time. And finally I'm like, do I really want that? Or am I just saying that because that's what I've always said? And it's like, you know what, I can do without, honestly. I mean, it would be cool, certainly. I'm not saying anything that would be bad about that, but like it just wasn't as important to me as other things. Where it was like I love quick turnaround projects, like just shorter type things. Like, would I really be comfortable and happy working on something for 2-3 years at a time? Like,
I was just gonna say, it makes you feel any better. You can work as a good dinosaur for like a super long time.
Yeah, and I don't know. For me, it was just like let's stay away from any of those things and keep reevaluating and really be honest with myself about what it is that I want at any given moment, Yeah. Cool. Any other questions?
I don't think so. We covered everything in our conversation that I was thinking about.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, let's make this the end of our little live thing here. For the kids burst in here. All right. It's been fun, and we'll see you again next week, maybe.
Awesome. Yeah.
All right. Okay, bye.
Bye.